Good morning, everyone. And let me just move my chair over a little bit. Okay, so today, first TGIF, and it's a Good Friday, and we're going to see if we can't get some more of this coding down. Working on an open source WalkTheWeb, 3D internet, and the whole goal is to have it done in about a month, get it out there online and let people download it and start working with me, and let's perfect it and get it out to the world. So creating 3D internet. First thing is just to catch you up. Right now I'm currently working on a section for the original code has iframes in it, and I use it to pass data back to the actual server from the site internally into itself. So the concept is basically to, let me resize it here so we can get the bottom of the page on the screen. It runs off the bottom. Okay, resizing a couple of my windows so I can bounce back and forth between them freely. But okay, so the concept is that we want to keep the front page always active, which means the animation is continuous, everything runs smooth in the front, and then at the same time, we want to make it where we are passing information back and storing it to the database as we go. So it's all synchronous commands, it's all trying to do things at the same time and making sure that it doesn't affect the animation. So we're doing them the smoothest way possible. We're also trying to minimize the footprint of the application so that we're not using too much memory at any one time, so that we have more memory available for the graphics and for the different things you're actually seeing on the screen and interacting with. So to do that, a lot of what I'm doing is I'm basically created iframes to be able to pass the information back. Now what I've done is I've created a dynamic way of building an iframe when I need it, flushing it through by posting the data back to the database, and then destroying the iframe afterwards. So right now I'm testing that process and making sure that it's running smooth using the app. Now, just so you know, right now the app, what I've done is I've remarked out, just to speed things along and also just to test this piece alone, I've actually remarked out some of the code so that we don't start the actual scene in 3D. We don't want to do that at the moment. I'm working with the login process, and it would take a whole lot more time every single time I refresh the page if I have to include all that too, especially since we're not actually working with that piece at this moment. Later on we'll turn it on as we're doing it. Also, just so you know, this is a coding day, so I'm coding. You can watch me code, create the open source version of the software, and at the same time, Mondays we will be doing Q&A, demos, anything else we can think of on those days. So that's Monday afternoons. Follow me so you watch for the times of when that'll be, but definitely jump in anytime. Hit me up in chat, and I'll answer your questions as we go to the best of my ability that we can do while I'm not losing track of what I'm coding. We do want to finish getting this out there in about a month, so I will be keeping my head down and trying to at least do some of that, keep more of that going. But, well, with that said, let's jump right into the code and let's test out a process here. The first thing is I'm testing out using this application for the login process. And so it's got my login and password. It remembers it from the browser. It also can set a cookie, so it depends if you click remember username or not. But right now, when I click login, what I'm checking for is, first of all, it logged in. Now, this part where it errors here, I'm not concerned with that right now, because looking that up in the code, what that is that's part of rendering the screen. When you're not logged in, the first thing you get is a default avatar. So it kind of looks like a robot. You can color it in your own colors. There's a male and a female version, so you can pick what you want. But those are going to be the people that are anonymous. And even if you log in, you can still choose to use one of those, but you get a few more options with it. Okay, so then once you log in, you basically get a choice of avatars, up to 10 different avatars currently. We'll expand that as we go, but that's the starting package, default package that I'm including right now at the moment. And so when you log in, what I do is I destroy I clear the screen so that you don't have the one login or the one avatar in place, the anonymous one, and it clears the space for you to create your logged in avatar. You can use the same one, that's your choice, but the code right here basically was calling that process. Now what I'm checking for is behind this page, I'm going to go into the part here. We have this iframe, and notice right now the iframe does have users still loaded, which means it did not clear it when the process ended. So I'm going to track that down, see if we can't find out what it is, how it's running, and see if we can make it disappear after it does the login process. So I'm going to click log out and not worry about that right now. Okay, so that's where we are. This is the process that starts the login. So this one will create the page, and I'm making sure that it only runs it one time, submits it one time. I added my own property, submitted equals 0 when you first load it, then it runs the app, it uses their onload function, which in this case created accounts right here, so you can see I fill the places, bring up the form, I transfer the information from the visible form that you're looking at the screen, like in this case it's well, we're doing the login, but this is the one for the registration. So I take those fields and I write them to the content of the iframe page, and that's the only piece you have to do here. And then it tells it with create iframe function, it uses the path to the iframe page and this onload function that we're passing into it. So what you end up with is I'm wrapping that function that you pass into it into the onload of the iframe. So what happens is iframe loads. When it completes loading, it passes the information onto the form, submits it, processes it again. It knows this time that it's been submitted, so then when it finishes, boom, kicks out, and it's done. So that part creates the form. And what I'm doing on the actual pages is, first of all, button value, bval, means that it's clicked a button on this page. So whenever it's clicked a button on the page, that means it's been submitted. So the next part is, we could do the properties. We could be really slick here and not worry about that part. I know. We're going to make this even easier. We're going to take this piece right here, and we're going to place it here on the page load. And what I'm going to check when it comes through, the reason we didn't close, I just found my own answer to that. When we write the page, one of the fields on the page that's required, well, I'm making 2 adjustments here, so this will definitely assist us. Okay, I'm back. Thank you. Okay, so what I'm doing here is I'm going to change it. What I forgot to do was we have the iframe name that we're passing back. So iframe name, first of all, that doesn't belong there. I'll fix that afterwards. That was the area I was testing. So we're going to pass the iframe name back into here. But what we want to do when we get that iframe name back is I want to, let's go back to our code here. When we get the iframe name back, we're checking to see if it exists, and then we remove it. Well, before we remove it, I'm going to, once it knows that the iframe exists, I'm going to check to see if the iframe submitted, okay, so if iframe and then this submitted, we want to see if it's 1, which means that it's loaded back after the page reload. So we're going to check to see if the value of that field has become 1. If it has, then we're going to go ahead and run this function, which will destroy the iframe, which means it's already been set. Now, the importance here is that this process happens after it does any return processes it needs to do with the actual app. Okay, so that creates it and then bounces it back to the server. They happen first, and then finally this happens, which takes you back to, clears the iframe back out. So we need to make sure when it processes, it's clearing the iframe, doing its cleanup work. Okay, so now let's test that out. And if we got everything right. So now when I click login, we're going to go ahead and click login. It should run the process. Everything went fine with that. We've technically logged in. And now we're going to check to make sure that it deleted the iframes. The iframes div class is right here, and notice there's nothing in it. Yay, it worked. Okay, so that allows us to clear out the iframes as we use them. So now with that done, I'm going to log back out and show menu on start. I'm going to do that so we don't have to see that each time. Okay, so now the next process that I'm going to work on is okay, so the next process I'm going to work on is actually creating the account. Okay, so I have the process in JavaScript. It loads this up. It basically has the form and we have the button. I'm going to show you in the code where we've done that, just so we're following along. Okay, so when it does it, this is the form. This is in the menu page. So the menu page has a section here for the menu profile. And within it, there's a couple different sections. If you're logged in, you get menu logged in section. That'll be showing the visual profile. If you haven't, you can log in. That's the login page that we just used. And then finally, menu register. So this will take us to a page where we can register. So let's see, let me get a drink. Okay, so with that, menu register, one of the things we have different fields. Notice this autocomplete. That assists with Google Chrome and others to know which fields to place certain values in case it's using the autocomplete functions of your browser. So we made it friendly with username, email, new password. Okay, and then we have the function of create account when they click the button to obviously create the account. That takes us back to the JavaScript, and we're doing the function create account. From there, I haven't done all the validation, and I'm going to hold off on that in a minute because I actually want to go to the back end of it and actually create the account into the database. So we'll do that part first. Right now I'm just going to test it with values that actually do work. Okay, so then, so now so we're going to register. We're going to click that button. It's going to take us to here. It's going to do the iframe page, bring us back to the users page, and it's going to be running the process for register, which is right here, which takes us back through the page, and we're going to create the function that it uses to register. So then where we want to put that is in the iframes page, users. Okay. Oops, not iframes. I apologize. That's the class users. We're going to run the class. And this has a number of things of setting some permissions, deleting permissions, users. Okay, so to create an account, first thing we're going to do is create the function. Okay, so what we're doing is creating the function. We're going to call this register, or I should just call it just like the button before so we can find it when we search across the site. Create user. Okay, and just for making sure we do things kind of the same way every single time, I'm going to copy this across here. And this kind of gives me a format of my error trapping. I like to create user there, and we're gonna pass back a value of if it was successful. Okay, so now what I want to do is, and I'm going to say, I'm going to keep that at the bottom of what I'm doing here. Okay, so the first thing we want to do is, we've already validated through the JavaScript is what I'm assuming, so we're not going to go into that section right here. What we're actually going to do is we're going to get, first of all, the values that have been passed on from the form, which is going to be, we're going to get the username, email, and password. And before I go passing a password, no, I'm not going to do it in raw text between the pages, between the functions. We're going to use some was it base 64 encoding. Okay, so with that said, we're jumping back up to where am I going from here? Okay, so from here we are going to do an if statement, and we're going to do this process. This should be on the WTW users class, create user, and we're going to be passing some values into that. I'm going to be passing, in fact, they are sitting right here from the login response. Attempt to login. Okay, so we're going to grab those same three things, copy that, and if that happens, if it's false, then we're going to return back some information. We're going to give it an error. We're going to write back an error to the page, so we're going to send back an error. Right now I'm just going to give it a name, and we're going to say equals could not create account. Oh, and here I am, create account and then create user. Consistency, let's fix that real quick. Let's just rename it to create account. I just realized that's the way I worded it in the other page. Okay, create account. We're going to go back to the user class, and we're going to change that to create account. Okay, we'll do the basics for afterwards. I'm just going to first, I've already created a user when I first did the install process, and I like consistency, so I'm going to look up the process that I've already done, and I'm going to make sure that when I create an account, I do it the exact same way that I did the first time. The more I duplicate code and make sure it looks the same, then the more it will. Okay, so what I did was I used the login page. That's why I didn't see it here. We're going to move all. I'm going to later on collapse the login into the user class, because you're logging in with the user and you're creating a user. There's no reason for them to be two separate things. This particular class, I'm creating it for the first user, but I'm automatically giving them admin access. And in this case, when they first come in, I'm going to be giving them just a basically subscriber access, so that they are a user of a site, not any access to the back end of any sites that they visit. So the first thing I need to do is copy that over. We're going to use this information here. Just to see, we have Z user, email, password, which is this here. So we're going to say Z password here. options. Let me just change it to Z options. What I like to do inside my code, just for consistency, is I like to use Z before any variable. That way I know it was created internal in the function and not outside the function. It makes things a little bit friendlier when you just glance right into the middle of some code, if you can see the difference between the two. So we're going to do that. Okay, so what we're doing is we're getting a password. It helps if I make them all variables. Okay, so we bring in the password. What happens is we do the password hash based on standard PHP practices. You can look it up on the PHP website. We're taking the password. We're doing the default setup for now. We'll expand that with different options later on because, of course, this is using the Blowfish. There's a couple other different hashes that it can use. You can even do your own custom hashes. We'll open that up and give additional options later on so that people can vary which way they set up and use it in their database. But for now, the default password hash is the one we're going to use, or the key for the hash. Say that properly. And when we create the new user, what we're doing is we pass in the username that they created with the account. We're going to validate that first because I want to make sure that the user doesn't already exist. The other part is we are assigning a user ID. I know this is kind of double work because if we have a unique ID for username, then why do we have a user ID? And the main reason is username is friendly. We can use it for things like the display if they haven't set a display name or changed anything on that. We can use it whenever we show something in public. But technically that name, I want to keep it where you can actually change your username at any time. And the user ID is the hard function that just says this was done by this person no matter what they call themselves at this time and stuff. So user ID may be what they're using on the outside, facing the world and what they log in with and everything else. But internally, I like using a user ID that in this case is a random 16 string. So it's a alphanumeric string, 16 characters long. Okay, so the other thing I do is if somebody was to find out what that user ID is for a person, because we do pass that, well, we try to use it when somebody logs in, we use it as the session variable. So we try not to pass it between pages. It's only when you're logged in on the system that it's actually using it internally. That's the tendency. Doesn't mean somebody couldn't figure out what somebody's user ID is. So I've added a second layer of just making things complicated for hackers or for somebody just trying to mine the data and find things. And that is I give a Z upload path ID. So when that user puts things onto the server, let's say you allow them to upload files into your site, well then it goes under a upload path ID, not the user ID, not the username or anything like that. It's not that predictable. So then you would have to look in the database, you would have to see what the user ID is, and then go to what the user of the upload path ID is. So it kind of gives us a degree of separation between the path ID and the user ID. So if somebody goes onto the site, starts just mining, looking for data, trying out all these different website paths, just trying to see if they could find data or something within the site, which this is all public information. We're not trying to hide anything if it's on the site written in files. So worst case, they're going to find a picture that if you went to their site, you'd see anyway. So we're not talking about a huge security risk here. But if they try to look for things just natively by the upload path ID, which you get, well then the thing is you wouldn't necessarily know what the user ID is based on that. You'd have to hit the database or go through the session variable to make that connection back to it. So it stays internal whose upload path is to what user, to the most part. So trying to be as secure as we can, that gives us just that degree of separation into the two. Okay, so I did see a note about VR ready and stuff like that. I want you to know, this is using the Babylon engine, and there's been a lot of work done on the engine side of things to use different VR sets. They have a whole list on their website, and we can actually just tap into it. We're calling up the scene, and all we have to do is say, use this camera view and use this particular setting with it. and it automatically shows it in the different types of VR headsets. So in our case, for example, let's say you have an Oculus, I can set up in the drop-down menu in the site where you can choose which camera you want. First of all, what view you're looking at with your avatar, and then if you're going to be using 2D view, or if you're going into 3D, or if you're going into, basically everything from the red cyan, 3D glasses, which I used to have a pair sitting around here, but it's all right. But going down to if you use the VR headset, also VR headset with gamepad, those are kind of generic ones. But then on the we can add to this list any ones that we've tested or even that we want to try to test. We can put them into this list so that the drop down is, I think Babylon already supports 15-ish, I don't know, 8 to 15, something like that, I don't know. But on the Babylon site, we can look them up, and as they add to their list, we can add them to our list fairly easy, because they do all the rendering for that particular headset and attach on all the game controls. So I don't have to do that. I just have to extend it out to you and tell you, turn on this particular view, turn on the different camera view. So I can add camera views. I've designed it in a way that we can add them very easily. We can select between them, so you can choose which one you want to use. It'll automatically take into account the different positions that you are on the screen, and we can keep on supporting them as new ones come out. So with that said, we do... that is a cool comment. I want to read this to everybody. Excellent. Didn't know that the future is already now. Hey, love that, and shout out to you. Let's see. Scrootzer. Okay. Hope I pronounced that right. If I didn't, you can yell at me. I'll accept it and get it right next time. But hey, I really appreciate that, and you know it. That's what I'm working on. I'm really trying to engage. I'm trying to make sure. I've been working on this for 8 years. I've tried to plan out so that it's global, so that it works for everything, and then we just have to keep on building off of it. So the framework itself is getting pretty stable. We're doing this open source project so that we can button it down with anything else that's left. Right now I'm globalizing it. I'm making sure that I'm putting notes in the fields. I'm putting different things that will help other developers look at the code and make sense of what I was trying to do at any one point in time. And then we'll just keep on going through things. We'll just keep on cleaning it up. We'll keep on improving the framework. And then we'll add the plugins to it so that you can sit there and create your own plugins and drop in the functionality that you want as a plugin. So instead of people designing full games, they can design a plugin, drop it in, and it works. So now with all that said, let's jump back to what we were doing. So I'm creating this here. It does the path, it does this, and just so you know, when I go to lunch this stuff, I'll probably change the cost or something just so that it, I don't know. We'll play around with that because I might change some of the hashes. But the hash, when you do it this way, I read that it's dependent on the server that it's running from, so basically the hash is host dependent, and just by writing that code this way and then validating using the PHP validation method, you basically validate method, then it stays secure. So that's the version that we're using. That's what we're writing into the database, and that's how we're using it. So I hope that answers some of the questions in that area. Okay, so let's see. And the last thing I do is when you register, I set the session variable as if you've logged in. There's 3 pieces I'm tracking right now, and that's your current username, that's your user ID, and that, once again, upload path behind the scenes. I may just write a function that pulls the upload path when you need it because you don't use it all the time. And like I said, I'm trying to, if I minimize whatever we need to load and make it only load it when we need it, then what happens is that gives more space for any person's computer to load up as much graphics and use it interactive in the scene. So I'm trying to minimize that side of it. Then one of the things I've done in the code is I'm saying we on that. We've got a couple people that have assisted me over the years. And one of the functions that we've written up here is actually designed to detect the browser, detect a lot of properties about the user's session that they're working in. We can detect the GPU, graphics processor that they're using. We can determine if it's low, medium, or high quality so that we can tell what we should push to it. We've detected what browser they're using, so we know kind of a background on that, and if there's any specifications we need to do specific for them, we can limit that down. Then we have for each one of the processors, we have different ways to rate how well they're doing, which class of the processor they're doing. For example, if they're the like the NVIDIA processors, you can see which series it is and then decide based on that which resolutions, quality, or capabilities it has. The other thing that I know we can do through code is we can get... Okay, so we can actually pull a lot of things. We can find out how much RAM they have or how much availability we have to run things. There's a lot of variables we can bring into it and then decide how much we should show at any one point on the scene. Babylon has some protection against that, where you can actually set some hard maxes where you say, no matter what, don't show more than X number of meshes on the screen at a time. There's ways that you can tell it, watch the complexity. I can monitor the frames per second that it's doing, and if it drops too low, it starts limiting down what it shows at any one time. All these things are balances that we can use to make it run efficient and smooth, because my goal is no matter what, we don't want to lag. We want it to run smooth on everybody's machines. We want it to work for everybody. Now, not to say that there's some what they call internet machines out there that weren't designed to be the most minimum internet machine you could ever have, and they may need a little bit more power behind them, because we are talking about a game. We're not talking about bringing up a standard web page or looking at a YouTube video. We're talking about it's got to have a little bit more capability where the processor, all the animation and stuff that happens is happening on the client side. So my server can handle it just fine. It sends you the information. Babylon runs from JavaScript, so it's loading up the gaming engine using WebGL from the browser's capabilities, everything on that side of it. So the whole idea behind it is that we get the servers running smooth, get the data to them, and then make it as efficient as possible so that we've included most of the machines that can possibly run anything even closely related to it. If we're aiming for that, all of you out there that have these great gaming computers are going to love it, because it's not that you'll get a smoother experience, probably. You will get to load more graphics because you have more capability to load graphics. Where some of the people are going to say, hey, it runs smooth for me, and I'm looking down the block and I see some rudimentary buildings. As I walk closer, they load. As I walk away, they unload, just like everybody else. But the difference is their span of what they can load and the details that they load at any one time may be limited, and wait till they get closer before they load. Now, I'm not talking about closer as in when to trigger loading them, but Babylon has this function that says the max that this computer can handle is loading this many shapes. So we will do some type of computation where it knows in the immediate area we want all the details so you don't miss anything. In the next area we want the highlights. In the next big area we want the highlights. But we do want some things off in the extreme, so you know to walk over there. There's a building out there that I haven't walked up to and viewed yet. And yet at the same time, if you do walk up to it, you get the same detail across the board from everybody else. Now, not to say that we're going to have some things that say, okay, this is the standard graphics, we're using 1024 graphics and it's high def, the whole bit, and then all of a sudden we crank up, which by the way, this thing could already support. We haven't done anything to limit it, but we could do 4K graphics standard as it sits today. I can even show you how we can do that with select items and still run efficient right now. The idea is, in fact, since I said it, and I got some attention with doing that stuff, since I got some attention with that 4K, here's the way it works. If you picture on your screen, you've got your resolution set. If you see something this big on your screen, in fact, something, let me talk to you a little bit bigger here. Let's see if we can, let me go to, there we go. Let's go to some video only. Since I'm doing some ranting, raving, here we go. We're not looking at code at the moment, so you might as well look at my ugly mug. Okay, so here we go. When you work and you're walking around in a scene, if you picture the size of your graphics on your screen, if you take an area and you walk farther away from it, the object that you're standing next to gets smaller and smaller. Obviously, this is all in perspective. So when it reaches a size that the pixels on the screen are smaller than the quality of the graphic, I don't care if you have 4K or not, if you show 4K at, let's say, half a mile down the block, then basically you're wasting a lot of processor power because it doesn't need a 4K graphic to fill an area on your screen that only has 50 or 512 pixels in it. So the idea is to switch the graphic size as we're traveling, as we're walking. That way, dynamically changing the image, changing the graphic that's on it, on the mesh, so that while you're walking up to it, it's increasing the value of the graphic quality as you approach it. So with this concept in mind, right now, many times you don't need to go beyond a 512 graphic. Like if I'm looking at a brick on the wall, okay, it's a brick on the wall. I can see it from this far away, I can see it from, pretty close, and it still looks like a brick on the wall. It's not grainy, it's not blurred, so no details needed. So then those ones, I still use the smaller graphic by default, but when I put, let's say, a poster on the wall, and this thing is a high quality poster, and I stretch it big, what happens is in perspective, that 512 becomes bigger than the 512 when it's viewed on the screen. So what I've done to make it simple is in the 3D CMS app that I wrote, all you have to do is click a checkbox and say use original graphic. Now, everything else around it can use dynamic graphic as it moves, as it walks, as it does whatever, but this one we're telling it to force it to always use the original graphic. And I've written the code. In fact, when we jump into the code, you'll see that when I pull the meshes out of the table, the molds and their packaging, everything that I'm trying to do, when I pull this out of the table, I actually check to see what graphic level you've set your computer to run at. If you set it to the highest graphics, I'm forcing higher graphics for you. If you say optimize it for me because it looks good as it is, then I balance out. I give you what you need at the time. I schedule graphics as you go, and I basically am running the whole show on that part. But if you designed a site and you said, okay, when you see this poster, I want it to always be high quality graphics. Now, as we're walking around, I'm sticking with your original image. I'm not reloading. I'm not changing it to smaller images. I'm not reverse engineering it and trying to use that to save graphics power on. Keep in mind, you don't want to do that a lot, but if I'm trying to show off something and just say, hey, a good example, I create an art museum. You can see pictures from a distance, about that big, and you're good to go. Hey, this is really cool. But if you walk up on a picture, let's say it's a Monet painting, and you want to see every single little dot that was in that original painting, then I would use a 4K graphic for it. I would use something that is, if you walked right up to it and you got as close as you could with the camera view, it would automatically show you the full quality of the original photo that you took of it. That's where it becomes really important. So when I take that graphic, I put the picture on the wall, I click the little checkbox that says use original graphic. Now when I'm walking around, I'm not seeing any blurry images on the wall. I'm seeing high quality photos. So that's where it makes a difference. That's where we use it. That's how we can balance between the two. Only do it when we need it. And then I still, as we're making everything run efficient, I may still say, okay, 4K graphics only get used when you're within this distance with your avatar, and set some type of distance where it goes to something else if you're not that close. Because we need to maximize the processing power, we need to maximize the graphics processing, we need to make sure that we're not overloading the system, which is too much in memory, and that's going to be a concern always with everybody. So we'll do the things, we'll be the watchdogs and make sure that it works well for you, but we're going to extend out as much as we can to make sure that you can do everything you need to do when you're using the site. Okay, my rant and rave is over. I'm going back to coding because, like I said, I want to drop this open source out there for everybody by the end of September. That's my goal. I want to have it out there so people can create 3D stores for this Christmas. That's my goal. I'm putting it here on video. Everybody's heard me. I really want to get 3D shopping out there for this Christmas. So pass the word. We're going to see what we can do. We're going to get it out there, and that's what I'm going to be working on up until then. So, okay. And let's see, we're going back to the other view so I can show the code. And once again, we're back to code view, and we're going to do the functions with creating the account. We're passing in the information, and I also don't need to pass that back. I don't know if there's anything I have to, well, when it comes back, I want to know the ID, and I got to set some things. So I'm going to be passing back some values after it does it. And okay, so now, yes, came off my high horse, got off the soapbox, and now back to code where this is what's going to get it done in the next month. So, okay, so now jumping in here, what do we have? We have, okay, function going in there. We grabbed what we needed from there. We have user going in here. We're saying create the user. We have username, email, password, and I'm going to be returning values, so I'm not going to return just blah, 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 blah. We're going to do this in 2 steps. I'm going to change that, but I'm going to change it afterwards. What I want to do is this. I'm going to, first of all, I want to know if it's successful. I want to know if there's any errors. I'm so used to putting, see, the word error is overused in code. So I use serr, which originally stands for string error. Then I started using it as the function for writing my errors to the database. And now I'm just an old school habit of saying serr instead of error. Everybody else uses error, and if I want to find out where my error correcting is and everything else, I look for serr. So that's the reason. There's really nothing other than years of habit going into that one. And then, like I said, if it's Z for going with my internal variables, which I should do to my success variable too. And success just means it got to the end of the process, everything looks good. We can do some additional testing if we want to see if it actually worked back that way. The other part here is we're going to do a couple tests. Before we write this to the database, by the way, this get random string, I'm going to extend that later on to check what table you're looking for a random string in to make sure that you don't get values. Picture this, 16 digits. So if we take 16 digits, what's that? Okay, I know billion is 9, 10 digits. Trillion, yeah, you see where I'm going with this. 16 digits, not only that, but they're alphanumeric, which means we have just, you got a better chance of winning the lottery every time you play than running over one of these and doing the same ID twice. With that said, it's not impossible. So system-wise, I like being a perfectionist. I like getting it right the first time and then nobody has a problem. So I might write something into the get random string where you actually say what table you're putting it in or what key value you're trying to write it for, maybe what table you're going to do it, and then do a check in the random string thing saying, look, is this field, is this ID field, and is this table using this random string already? So we can make sure that they're always really are random and not used in that particular table if we have to go to that degree. If we don't, guess what? 1 in a, whatever number that is, 16 alphanumeric. So yeah, our chances of getting a bad one that's already used is very, very, very slim. In fact, you have a better odds of getting struck by lightning while you're using your computer, while you're using the site, than us duplicating an ID. And if you take any classes on probability and odds, then yes, you'll see that really quick. But what I want to check, though, is I need to make sure that the username is currently not in use. I can also check if the user ID is in use or the path ID is in use. Another way of doing this for us could be I could straight out write 3 different functions, and when they come in, I just check them, and if it finds it in use, well, if I do get random string and I'm checking, make sure they're not used, then I don't need that one. For now, I'm going to check the username and make sure it's not in use. Let's do it as a separate function. Talk myself into it as I'm doing this. So I'm going to create another function real quick. Like I said, I like to package all my functions nice and neat and clean. And going to put that here. And this one is going to be check username. Check username, we're going to be looking to see if there's a duplicate already in use. Do we need to check email? Blah, 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 blah. Okay, real quick, the handful of you that are looking in and watching what I'm doing right now, tell me, should we allow multiple user accounts based on an email address, or should the email be unique? Give me a quick feedback of unique. If email should be unique, click 1. If put something in there, vote with a 1. If email should not be unique, throw a 0 in there. Okay, email should be unique so far. Is this thing on? Hey, thank you. Thank you. That's 2 of you. Anybody else want to put in a vote? I think if they're unique, the advantage of doing unique is that we could use the email to look up their account if they forgot their username and their login. So, okay, the ayes have it. Thank you for voting. Okay, so what we're going to do is we're going to check username, and we're going to also write one that checks the email address to make sure that they're both new. Since we're creating a new account, we're going to first thing we're going to do is we're going to check the username. We're going to say global. Okay, so WalkTheWeb iframes and query. We're going to query it first. We're going to say select everything from users where username equals, and we're going to put in this username. Okay, and that'll give us that part. The other thing we have to do on every one of these is use the table prefix, so that if somebody set their table to a different prefix, it automatically grabs it. Okay, so we're looking in the users table. Notice it's, okay, let's go over here. Users, where's users? We're looking in users. We're looking under the columns. We're looking for username uniqueness. So we're checking the username, seeing if it exists. I don't care if it's deleted or not, because just because they deleted an account doesn't mean it can't be revised. It may be I deleted an account because their username was ugly and I wanted to kind of shut them out. So I want to leave that option open as a webmaster for whoever's running this website for hosting. So I'm basically not checking to see if it's only deleted ones. I'm checking to see if that username was in use anywhere. Because if you ever turn it back on and undelete something, then that name would be in a conflict again, and we don't want to make that too complex. So with this, we want the results. Results equal, and we're going to say for each results as row, seeing if we've delivered any rows back. If we find a row, this particular one, we are saying they're unique if it doesn't find it. So if it finds it, see success equals false. We could do like statement, doesn't hurt. Like would catch the upper and lower case. Most databases aren't. You're right. Actually, we should do that only because if they use mixed case, we want to catch all the different variances of it. I could just say lower around the different variables so that they both compare them as lower. If I use like, then we're doing like. We don't have to put any wildcards because we don't want to know if that username is in another username. We just want to know that it's the one. So it does depend. It depends on their setup. Especially, hey, we go worldwide with this thing. We don't know what they did in other countries. They could have different character sets. They could have different meanings to everything. So you are correct. That is good. And you know what? I am going to make a little mental note, and not just a mental note. Let's make a physical note. And I'm going to double check that. Oops. Didn't want to open that one. let me get back to I have a notepad, a to-do list, and I'm going to make sure where I use lower and DB statements, use like. And I know that when I did publish names and stuff, I drop them to lowercase to check and see if they're valid. The other thing is I have to do some testing when I have to do testing to make sure that they're legitimate characters for a web URL. So there's some things I'm doing already, testing on that side of things, but that definitely helps. And another shout out to you, Scrootzer. Thank you very much on that one. You're right. That's one thing I won't have to come back to and fix later on. So, hey, much appreciated. Also, we don't want to set that to true. We're setting it to false if we found the item. So now we have a check for that. We have copy that, and we're going to create one for email address. And we're going to make this as straightforward as possible. Okay, so we have that. We're going to pass in the same table. We're going to pass in this and check to see if the email is the same. I believe I didn't call it user email or anything, but let me just double check here. We did call it straightforward email. I like it when I do it simple. Don't make it any more difficult than it has to. Try not to use underscores any more than you have to. Try not to, you know how it is. Okay, so we've got a check email function. It's going to be that it exists unless it finds it. Wait a minute. And then it says false, we can't use it. So we're saying basically if this is valid. So when I come through here, we want to say if. So we're going to do this pretty straightforward. If check username and check username, and we're going to say check email. So then we know they're both true. We're not going to go on beyond that if it isn't. And we're returning false because we're not going to process this. We're going to not get to where it says success equals true. So now we do have some validation in there to make sure that we're not duplicating usernames and email addresses. We can do some logic. I'll break this down later on. I don't want to spend too much time on it right now, but we're going to do some logic on that will say which one it actually is so that we can return back. Oh, actually, okay, we'll do it now. We have a Z error right here. I'm going to break this into two statements so I don't actually question it twice. So we're going to say, we're going to do it this way. If the username is there, and then we're going to go if this. And the reason for doing this is so that I can write separate errors. So what we're getting is this area right here, we're defining. Okay, so then based on which one it tripped on, if it tripped on, okay, if it tripped on get username, then this error right here is going to be the outside one. So Z error equals name, or I should say username. See, this is where I'm going back and forth between create user, create account. I got to be very careful of how I do that. Account. Okay, username, because this is a field on the actual form. Username is already in use. And we can say on this other one, later on I'll do a language pack. We'll design the whole system to be able to switch languages. Let's first get it out there in open source, and then people that actually know the other languages can help me translate and make sure we get some good, really cool roots on doing this in other languages for other parts of the world. Okay, so email is already in use. We've trapped both those. Then what we want to do is we want to return an array here of values. We will say if we'll say success, and we're going to give that the value of that. We're going to, comma. No, actually, am I returning array or am I returning it this way? Let me think this. I keep on, that's the JavaScript way. Let's say we're going to return an array. We're going to do it this way. Now I'm getting it right. Okay, and we're going to return the S error. Oops. And that's going to give us, since we're already setting the session variable and everything else there, I think we're good on that. I want to return these two new values also. So at this time, I see the need for returning the values. We have it in session. We're going back to that page. Yes, we're going to want to, when the page reloads there, we're doing that. See, okay, so since we've logged on, since we created a user and it logs on, what it does is it sets the session variable. So now anytime we use an iframe, it will be with the new session variable. But what we didn't do is we haven't updated the page to tell it that we've logged on. We did that for our actual login process. So a lot of the parts that we need to update on the page and various sections where we want to put the username and display name and all this other stuff are there. I think what I want to do is say that it's success, and then based on that success, pull those values separately than this function, because that could change over time of how we do that. So for now, I'm going to say we've got a success coming into here. And then what I'm going to do is, okay, so we brought back an array. So now what I want to do is, before I was doing it this way when I passed it to it, but now I want to change the way I do this. We're going to take this. We're going to set that as a variable. So this will be results equals this. Now we've got the array back as that, and now based on that array, we can check, we should be able to check the results and success. If success equals false, could not create a count. That's very bland, stirred over that. You know, we might want to do, let's do a default thing. Let's catch everything. So if it goes through, trips on that process, doesn't become a success for whatever reason, let's say SQL table disappeared or something weird happened in the back end. Maybe the table, maybe they took their SQL offline or something. When people try to do this, we're going to need to know what that S error was written, because that error comes from this page. It could be more than just these two values. We could even get technical if we wanted to. I don't like to show it to the outside people, but we could say in our code, we could, when we write the error to the database, we could also tell them what that error is. We'll play around with that later on. But the idea is that since we've also given it that, we can say an S error in the code. So instead of not just could not create a count, we want to know if the results S error equals blank. If error, or it's not blank actually, let's check to see if it's not blank, then basically we're going to wrap it this way so that we have the else if. We can check the success of the function second. So if we've given it a direct thing, then we want to know, we're going to pass it to the local variable of this page equals this value. Otherwise, we're looking to see if the whole function was a success here, and then could not create a count, and we're bouncing that back to we're going to pass that information back. We're going to pass more than that, but at the moment, I haven't created a variable for it yet. We're going to create something. We're going to pass it back this way. So we'll get back to that. As I'm watching the time, I have someplace I have to go in just a little bit, so I'm going to wish everybody a happy Friday. Thank you for tuning in. Notice on my YouTube page, you can connect below. If you click on the one that says, what is WalkTheWeb, what is 3D Internet, down below, you can see what I have for... okay, let me finish talking, then talk, right? Okay, so get it back on a page where you can actually see me. If you click down below, you can see 3D Internet. That takes you to my YouTube page where there's a handful of different videos and some demos and different stuff that I've done with the site as I was creating it and building things and testing out code. There are tutorials on some of the admin section, and mind you that I've rewritten the menus so they look a lot prettier now than some of the old ones that I put out there. And then also the other part is the in here, when I first started doing the streaming, this series, there's one that I've saved on there that says walkthrough on the code. It gives you a 2-hour breakdown of how I laid out the code and how we're using different things. While I go through it, I'm actually telling you the theories behind why it works and how it works. Keeping the animation live on the front page while doing all the different database writes behind the scenes, the evolution of it, how it came about, why I did some of the things the way I did. You can get a lot out of it. It's a 2-hour series. YouTube, like I said, a lot of things there. So between the two, you can catch up on it. And then on Monday, I'm going to be showing off some demos. We're going to talk. I'm going to be very interactive with you. I'm going to try to spend a lot of time in the chat. We're doing that Monday, California time, Pacific Standard Time. We're going to do that at 1:30, just after lunch. And I hope to see you then. We'll see how much stuff we can show off. I'll show you the working program. I'll show you some stuff from my hosted version of the site where I started to create this dynamic version from. We'll get into it. And I'll show off a bunch of stuff. We'll see what we can do. So thank you for tuning in. Monday, see some animations. I'm going to show you how I can take something from Blender, how I can export it. I'm going to walk you through a bunch of stuff. You're going to see how we take from Blender, how we export it as a Babylon file, how we put that into our app using the media library, and then how we drop them into scenes as just another object in the scene. So I'm going to take you through, walk you through a handful of different stuff, show off a little bit of things we've created, and see if we can't, get things started there. So have a great weekend, and I will talk to you again on Monday. Take care.